aspects of the trade finance industry are actually making progress. And I sat down and I tried to work out all the things which go on in this industry. It's not where I come from. I'm a securities market person, but there's so many different processes: documentation, physical shipment, financing, payments, working capital, communications, transaction management, underwriting, credit risk, sensors. It goes on and on. Is it possible, Simon, to say, well, here are some quick wins we can get in this industry. Here are clear areas where the industry is actually making progress towards digitization. And if so, what are those areas?
I mean, from my perspective, the work we're doing with Danny and the guys at TradeFinex and Marco Polo is a perfect example of that, where data matching engines can match information in trade flows. The banks and the financing institutions want the risk mitigation, but they'd like it to be automated. And if you can do that through nodes in one of the blockchain communities, much the better, much the more automated and smooth that process is. So I think there is definitely progress. Some of these programs we're looking at will go live soon. They're real, they work, and they have a lot of big institutions behind them. But I think that's just the start. But the reality is the risk mitigation and the trade process almost go hand in hand now. You can't do one without the other. So the corporate KYC, the due diligence on the customer may be done externally, but the reality of the actual automation of the trade transaction needs a multitude of pieces for it to be automated. And without it, it won't work. So that's exactly why I've been working. Danny, over to you, but you're the expert in those areas. But
yeah, I think that's what we are seeing happening, and that's what we're trying to do with the Marco Polo network, is that we digitize these processes of risk mitigation and financing. We deal with data sets. We handle documents as attachments in PDF if they're still required. So it's really a path from the old world into the new world, and we team up with a third-party service provider like Polestar, who is a leader in the e-bill of lading scenario, compliance scenario, etc. And we are also working with the emerging ESG provider, so Carbon Chain or Rainforest Company, that are providing certificates that can be used in a matching exercise. Today, all these processes are super manual and cumbersome. And various banks have stopped using them or have difficulties using them because it's all manual, more documents added on to already a manual process. And we can digitize this with the Marco Polo network. We have already use cases. We partner with these banks, and we will have this up and running in the first half of next year in a way that will allow and will drive benefits to both corporates as well as banks, as well as the third-party service providers.
Gabriel, as you view what's going on with the various digitization initiatives, do you feel the scene is too chaotic? Are there too many initiatives going on? Does it need somebody to bring all these threads together and provide an overview of some kind? Because as we've heard repeatedly, this is a very complex, very fragmented industry. Is there a body which could do some consolidation work on digitization initiatives, or must we just make progress where we can?
Good question. I don't have an answer to that. I think there is a need to have consolidation when it comes to the tech, when it comes to the terminology. We need greater consistency so that everybody's working off the single platform. And I think that the challenge is that you have a number of different platforms and different terminologies, which is causing a bit of confusion. I cannot think of an overriding, I can't see it, the OECD or ICC, but I'm not close enough. I think that's to take that ownership, and maybe Danny or Jacko could have a viewpoint on that.
Yeah, there are some initiatives there, like the DSI, the Digital Standards Initiatives, and I'm part of the steering group for digital trade for ICC as well. And there, for instance, I'm co-chairing the fintech adoption stream, for instance, also to make it easier for fintechs to work with banks. If you're a fintech, you have a product, how do you go about, introducing that to a bank, and what do you need to think of? So I think there are many things happening in that area that we're trying to see. Can we find common denominators? How can we work together? From our perspective, we have now introduced like your EBL as a service, basically, that we are enabling it to be plugged in, for instance, to Marco Polo or other initiatives like Contour, what have you. I think before you have a global standard, it will take a long time. Until then, you have to focus on interoperability. How can you connect? How can you work together? And how can you make sure that it doesn't really matter, who is actually. Is an EBL used under a traditional LC or is it used under a Marco Polo smart contract? It's still a transport document with transport data and it has a certain function, for instance, as a title document. I think that's for now key, and over time, hopefully there will be some global standards, but it is a long way, especially when it is around government to government topics on, certificate of origins or phytosanitary certificates or those type of things. It will be a challenge.
Yeah, but I would like to add a point here, because the industry has made good progress over the last 3 years to debate standardization, to understand the importance of it. And now with the DSI, the Digital Standards Initiative of the ICC, we have now a vehicle that can tackle this. I agree fully with Jaco. This will be a decade long of work to have standards similar to the telecoms industry, for instance, right? We can send each other emails no matter who the provider is. We can use our mobile phones all around the world. That wasn't the case 20 years ago. But standards in that industry help that happening. And the same will be on the trade side. And with Oswald Kuiper, the DSI has a leader that comes from BHP Billiton. So it's a practitioner that understands the day-to-day requirements and the suboptimal scenarios of today's systems. And he is going to drive these various standardizations that Jaco has mentioned. E-bill of lading is just one of it, right? There are like 20, 30 others that need to be tackled that are even more complicated than the e-bill of lading. And so I'm cautiously optimistic that the industry now understands the importance of standardization, and I sense a willingness for them to work together.
Yeah, and I see also a big role there for the development banks. Like behind the DSI, all the 4 major development banks has teamed up to also support that initiative, also to try and, to close the trade finance gap out there. And also to Philippe's point earlier on the call, the development banks also help out with, enabling confirmation on certain transactions by just, issuing standbys to cover the risk.